So I lost my dad in January of 2012 to Lou Gehrig's disease. Very difficult thing to watch happen. But I learned a lot about the difference about what science is, and also when you compare it to law. When my dad's disease first presented as twitching in his right bicep, we didn't know if it was Parkinson's disease or if he strained a muscle, because I've had twitching in my arms too, and happens to everybody. But we took, it was starting to really concern him. And he was noticing some numbness in his tongue. And so he went to a specialist I think it was in Illinois. And my sister took him. And the specialist diagnosed him with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And he had only presented symptoms about just a few months earlier. So obviously the family was devastated. My dad was devastated. We were all very upset. And so, well, you know, like it always happens, let's get a second opinion. Let's talk to somebody else. So we took him to Henry Ford Hospital here down in the Detroit area, and we found out that they had a pretty good team to deal with ALS. And so the doctor looks at my dad and he says, "What?" He says, "Who told you you have ALS?" And he says, "Well, we went to the specialist at this hospital." And the doctor at Henry Ford says, "Well," he says, "you know, they do have a good clinic." He says, "But look," he says, "it is way too premature to diagnose Lou Gehrig's disease. You have to rule out a whole bunch of stuff before you can make that diagnosis. You have to rule out Lyme disease. You have to rule out other neurodegenerative disorders, MS, this kind of stuff." So he says, "I just can't believe that." Did they rule this stuff out? My dad said, No, they didn't." So anyway, time passes, about a year passes, and the symptoms get worse and worse. He can't swallow anymore. He's having trouble controlling his hands. He's having issues with his memory, this type of thing. It gets really bad. So finally, the specialists at Henry Ford say, "Your dad has ALS. He's got Lou Gehrig's disease." And because they had done all these tests and they had ruled it out. So what I'd ask you to do is think about something for me when you look at that case, as I did. In the world of science, the doctor that first diagnosed my dad with Lou Gehrig's disease, in my opinion, erred. Okay? He made an error, and the reason is because the conclusion or the result that he communicated to my dad and our family was not based on the right protocol or the requisite information. You don't diagnose somebody with Lou Gehrig's disease unless you have taken these other steps that are part of the protocol for what they call a backdoor diagnosis. It's the phrase that they use, that you have to rule out all this other stuff. So the doctor that first diagnosed my dad with Lou Gehrig's disease made an error because he jumped way ahead of himself. And he rendered a conclusion that was not based on the requisite information. Now, in the world of law, the doctor did not make a mistake because he was right. And there's nobody to blame. There's no injustice that was rendered. He was right. My dad had Lou Gehrig's disease. Okay? And I have shared that story many times. I do a lot of speaking and teaching, and I share that story with just about anybody I can because it really emphasizes the difference between law and science. Scientists and lawyers play by completely different sets of rules. They operate in completely different cultures, both very important. But it is really important when we vet science and when we really look at it, it all comes down to the question that is being asked. Okay? Like I shared with you earlier, and even you can apply it to my dad's diagnosis, is what is the disease that my dad has? That was the question.